Hello, it's nice to see you here. I thought tonight we could talk about writing and books. Not in any kind of urgent way, just talk about them. The way you might talk about a good sandwich or a reliable pair of gloves. I've been thinking about books lately because I reorganized my bookshelf last Tuesday. It took about 4 hours. That's longer than it should take, probably. But I kept opening books and reading a paragraph here and there. And then I'd remember where I was when I first read that paragraph. And then I'd have to sit down for a minute. That's one of the things about books. They're time machines, sort of. But the quiet kind. The kind that don't make any noise or use any electricity. I have a copy of The Old Man and the Sea that I bought at a library sale in 2003 for 50 cents. It has a coffee stain on page 47 that I made in 2007. I know it was 2007 because I was reading it during a particularly cold February, and I was drinking more coffee than usual to stay warm. My heating bill that month was high. I remember thinking about that while I read about the old man on his boat in the warm Gulf Stream, and how, even though he was having a hard time, at least he wasn't cold. That's not in the book, obviously, that thought. But it's in my copy of the book now, permanently. When you write something down, it stays, even if no one else reads it, even if you throw it away. It existed. Someone put words in a particular order, and for a moment, those words made a shape that had never existed before in the history of the universe. That's something. I tried to explain this to my neighbor, Gene, and he said, "That's true about everything, though, isn't it? Every moment is unique." And I said, yes, but with writing, you can fold up the moment and put it in your pocket. He thought about that, and then said, "I guess so," and we went back to raking leaves. Gene doesn't read much, but he's a thoughtful person. I started writing when I was in 3rd grade. We had an assignment to write about our favorite animal, and I chose the beaver. I spent a long time on it, maybe 2 hours, which when you're in 3rd grade is like a significant portion of your life, proportionally. I wrote about how beavers build dams, and how the dams create wetlands, and how the wetlands help other animals. I was very interested in the cooperative aspect of it all. Beavers working together, creating habitat. I used the word habitat in my report. I was proud of that. Mrs. Kowalski gave me an A-. The minus was because I misspelled engineering. I remember feeling that the English language had betrayed me with that word. Too many vowels in unexpected places. But I also remember the feeling of finishing that report, of having said everything I wanted to say about beavers, of having put my thoughts into sentences that other people could read. Mrs. Kowalski had read my thoughts about beavers. That felt important. I still think about beavers sometimes. They're very focused animals. They have a task and they do it. They don't seem to worry about whether their dam is going to be appreciated by the other beavers or whether it's the best dam. They just build it. There's probably a lesson there. When you write, you're building a dam of words. That's not a perfect metaphor, but stay with me for a second. You're taking all these thoughts that are flowing around in your head, sometimes calm, sometimes rushing, and you're arranging them in a way that creates something, a pool of meaning. A place where ideas can settle. Sometimes the dam holds, sometimes it doesn't. I wrote a short story once about a man who collected rain in different containers to see if it tasted different depending on what you collected it in. Glass jars, plastic buckets, ceramic bowls. He would taste each one and write down his observations. In the story, he never reached any conclusions. He just kept collecting rain and tasting it. I submitted it to a literary magazine. They rejected it. The rejection letter said, "Thank you for your submission. This piece isn't quite right for us." That's all it said. I remember reading that and thinking, well, what would be right for them? But I never found out because I didn't submit anything else to that magazine. I still like that story, though. I think about that man sometimes, standing in his backyard with all his containers, waiting for rain, patient, attentive to small differences that might not mean anything. That's writing too, paying attention to small differences. The difference between sad and melancholy, between walked and wandered, between he said and he mentioned. These differences are small, but they're real. I went to a bookstore in Milwaukee once. This was about 6 years ago. It was one of those independent bookstores with creaky wooden floors and books stacked in ways that seemed more geological than organizational, like the books had settled there over time, layer by layer. I spent 3 hours in that store. I didn't buy anything. I just walked around, picking up books, reading the first page, putting them back, picking up another one. There was a woman there doing the same thing. We kept almost meeting in the aisles, both reaching for books, both stepping back politely. After about an hour of this, we acknowledged each other with a nod, not in an unfriendly way, just a recognition that we were both doing the same thing. On one of the shelves, I found a book called The Poetics of Space by Gaston Bachelard. I had never heard of it. The cover was simple, white with black text. I opened it to a random page and read, "The house we were born in is more than an embodiment of home. It is also an embodiment of dreams." I stood there for a while, thinking about the house I grew up in, the way the stairs creaked in a particular pattern, the window in my bedroom that looked out at a birch tree, the smell of the basement, which was not a good smell, but it was our basement smell. I didn't buy the book. I wish I had. But I remember that sentence. I've carried it with me for 6 years now, rent-free, as they say. That's another thing about reading. Sometimes you only need one sentence. One sentence can live in your head forever and change the way you see things. There's a genre of book called cozy mystery. I learned this recently. They're mystery novels where the murders aren't too graphic and usually take place in small towns or villages, and there's often a cat or a bakery involved. The detective is usually an amateur, someone who owns a bookstore or makes quilts. I found this comforting, the idea that there's a whole genre of books dedicated to making murder cozy. It says something about humans, I think. Our ability to take even the darkest things and make them manageable, solvable. Place them in a context where order can be restored, where someone who makes very good scones can also solve crimes. I tried reading a cozy mystery once. It was called Death by Donut or something like that. I got about halfway through. It was fine. The donuts were described very well. Too well, maybe. I got hungry and had to stop reading to make a sandwich. I never finished it. I think about that sometimes. There's a murderer in that book who I never found out about. They're still out there in a way, on my bookshelf, unsolved. Maybe I'll finish it someday, or maybe it's nice to have unfinished books, books that are still waiting. Possible. When I was in high school, I had an English teacher named Mr. Patterson. He was a thin man with a beard that seemed like it was trying its best but not quite succeeding. Patchy. He wore sweater vests. Mr. Patterson loved books in a way that seemed almost painful. He would read passages out loud and his voice would catch. He'd have to stop and clear his throat and apologize. "Sorry," he'd say. "This part always gets me." We read The Great Gatsby in his class. When we got to the part about the green light at the end of Daisy's dock, Mr. Patterson stopped reading and looked out the window for a full minute. We all sat there in silence. Then he said very quietly, "Isn't that just everything?" And we, being 16 and 17 years old, had no idea what he meant, but we understood that it meant something to him. Something big. Now I'm older and I think I understand a little better. That green light, that unreachable thing we move toward, that hope that might be foolish but feels necessary anyway. Mr. Patterson died 4 years ago. Heart attack. I heard about it from my mom, who still lives in my hometown and hears about these things. I thought about going to the funeral, but I didn't. I don't know why. I think I was afraid it would be too sad, which is a stupid reason not to go to a funeral. That's what funerals are. Instead, I took my copy of The Great Gatsby off the shelf and read the last page. The one about boats against the current. I read it out loud. To no one. My voice caught, and I had to stop and clear my throat. "Sorry," I said to my empty living room. This part always gets me. I'd like to think Mr. Patterson would have appreciated that. The way a thing he taught me is still here, still working. There's something about holding a book, the weight of it. Some books are heavy, not just because of what's in them, but actually physically heavy. You can't read them in bed without your arms getting tired. I have a collected works of Tolstoy that weighs about 4 pounds. I've never read all of it. I'm not sure I ever will. But I like knowing it's there. All those words. All that thinking Tolstoy did, preserved. Waiting. Tolstoy had a lot of thoughts about a lot of things. Not all of them good thoughts, probably. But persistent thoughts. He wrote them down with a quill and ink, which must have been tedious. All those dips in the inkwell, all those scratches on paper, and now I can go to a bookstore and buy all of his thoughts for maybe $20, which, when you think about it, is remarkable. Centuries of thinking compressed into a portable object you can hold in your hands, although again, it's heavy, so you wouldn't want to carry it around too much. I tried to write a novel once. This was about 8 years ago. I had an idea about a man who moves to a small town in the Upper Peninsula and starts a very slow-paced newspaper. Like, the newspaper only comes out once a month, and it's mostly about things that aren't urgent. Recipes, profiles of trees, the history of the local post office. I got about 70 pages in. It was going okay. I had named the main character Harold, which felt right. Harold was methodical and kind. He noticed things. But then I got stuck. I didn't know what should happen. I knew what Harold was like, but I couldn't figure out what he should do, what the story was. I stopped writing it. The pages are in a drawer somewhere. I look at them occasionally. Sometimes I think I should finish it. Sometimes I think it's fine the way it is. Incomplete, a possibility that never quite became actual. There's something peaceful about that. An unfinished novel in a drawer. It hasn't failed yet. It's still just waiting. Like a garden in winter. Speaking of gardens, I read a book about gardening once. This was unusual for me because I don't garden. I kill most plants I try to care for, not on purpose, just through neglect or overwatering or putting them in the wrong amount of sun. But this book made gardening sound very philosophical. The author talked about patience and observation and working with natural systems instead of against them. He talked about compost like it was magic, which in a way it is. Decay turning into growth, death feeding life. I didn't start gardening after reading the book, but I thought about it differently. I looked at gardens more carefully, noticed things. That's what books do, I think. They don't necessarily change what you do, but they can change how you see. And seeing differently is its own kind of action. There's a used bookstore about 40 minutes from where I live. It's in the basement of a building that used to be something else. A bank, maybe. The ceilings are low and the lighting is fluorescent, and there's a smell that's hard to describe. Old paper and dust and time. The owner is a man named Dennis. He's probably in his 70s. He sits behind a desk reading and doesn't look up when you come in. There's no greeting. No can I help you find anything. You just enter and start looking, and Dennis keeps reading. I like this. The lack of performance. The understanding that we're all just here because of books, and we don't need to make it into a whole thing. I go there maybe once every couple of months. I browse. Sometimes I buy something. Last time I bought a book about the history of the Great Lakes for $3. It's very detailed, very factual, the kind of book that's not trying to entertain you. It's just presenting information about the Great Lakes. Take it or leave it. I've read about 60 pages. I've learned a lot about glaciers and lake effects, snow and shipping routes. I'll probably finish it eventually. Or maybe not. Either way, it was worth $3. Once I asked Dennis how he decides what to buy for the store. He looked up from his book. This was unusual. Him looking up, and said, I don't really. People bring me boxes of books and I give them a few dollars and put the books on the shelves. That's the system. Do you read them all? I asked. No, he said. That would be impossible. I read the ones that interest me. The rest just exist here. He said this like it was obvious, like the books didn't need to be read to have value. They just needed to be. I think about that sometimes. All those books in Dennis's store, existing, waiting for the person who needs them. Some of them might wait forever, but they're still there, still holding all their words in order, patient. I wrote a poem once. This was not something I normally did, but I was watching snowfall one evening, and I had a thought about snowflakes and uniqueness and how we're told every snowflake is different, but we can't actually see the differences with our naked eyes, so we just have to trust it. And I thought there was something there, something worth writing down. So I wrote a poem. It was 12 lines. It didn't rhyme. I wasn't trying to make it beautiful. I was just trying to say the thing I was thinking in the most accurate way possible. When I finished it, I read it out loud to myself. Then I folded the paper and put it in a book about birds, I think, some field guide. It's still there, as far as I know. I don't remember which bird book. So the poem is lost, sort of, but also preserved, waiting to surprise me someday when I'm looking up information about a warbler. I like this. The idea of leaving small things for yourself to find later, messages across time. Hello, the poem will say when I find it. Remember when you were thinking about snow? There's a book I've been meaning to read for probably 15 years. It's called The Rings of Saturn by W.G. Sebald. People whose opinions I respect have told me it's wonderful. You'd love it, they say. It's very you. I'm not entirely sure what very you means, but I trust them. I've owned a copy for at least 10 years. It sits on my shelf. I look at it sometimes. The cover has a black and white photograph of a pier or a boardwalk. It looks dignified, but I haven't read it. And at this point, the not reading of it has become its own thing. The book exists in my life as an idea, a possibility. The book I will read someday when the moment is right. Maybe the moment will never be right. Maybe I'll die without reading it. That would be okay, I think. Not ideal, but okay. The book will have still meant something to me. It will have been a companion in its own way. The unread book. The promise. Although I probably should just read it. It's supposed to be very good. When I write, I do it in the morning. Early. Before the day has really started and things need to be done. I make coffee and sit at my kitchen table and write in a notebook with a pen. This is old-fashioned, I know. I could use a computer. It would be faster. But there's something about the pen touching paper. The slight resistance. The physical act of forming letters. It makes the writing feel more real somehow, more present. Each word is an action, not just a thought. I don't usually write anything important. Observations, small ideas. Questions like, why do we say head over heels when that's the normal position of a head relative to heels? Things like that. Sometimes I'll write a memory. Something that happened 20 years ago that I suddenly remember for no reason. Like the time I saw a deer standing in a parking lot at night, illuminated by a streetlight, completely still. Just standing there, looking at nothing in particular. I watched it for maybe 5 minutes. It never moved. Then I went inside, and when I came out the next morning, it was gone. I don't know what that memory means, but I wrote it down. Now it's saved. Now it can't be completely forgotten. That's what writing does. It fights against forgetting. Not always successfully, but it tries. There are writers who write every day. Thousands of words. They have discipline and schedules and word count goals. They treat writing like a job because for them it is a job. I admire this. The dedication, the professionalism. But I could never do it. Some days I don't want to write. Some days I don't have anything to say, and forcing it seems wrong, like trying to make yourself laugh. The mechanics might be there, but the spirit isn't. So I write when I write. And I don't when I don't. And I try not to feel guilty about it, though sometimes I do anyway. There's a quote by Kafka, Franz Kafka, who wrote very strange and sad stories about people turning into bugs and being put on trial for crimes that were never explained. He said something like, "A non-writing writer is a monster courting insanity." That seems harsh, but I understand what he meant. For some people, writing isn't a choice. It's a pressure that needs to be released. The words build up, and if they don't get out, something bad happens. I'm lucky, I guess, that I'm not that kind of writer. I'm the other kind. The kind who writes sometimes because it's pleasant and helps me think, but who can also not write and be okay. Although maybe Kafka would say I'm not really a writer then. Maybe he'd say I'm just someone who writes occasionally. And maybe he'd be right. I think Kafka would be difficult to have a conversation with. Very intense. You'd probably feel bad about yourself afterward, even if he didn't mean to make you feel bad. But he wrote some interesting things, that's worth something. I read books before bed. This is common. A lot of people do this. It's supposed to be relaxing. Better than looking at a screen, which wakes you up with its blue light. I find it very relaxing, usually. Although sometimes I get too interested in the book and stay up too late. I'll tell myself just one more chapter, and then it's one, and I have to work in the morning and I'm tired, but also satisfied. The book was good. The staying up was worth it. Other times I read the same page 3 times because my brain is too tired to absorb the words. They just sit there on the page, meaningless. And I realize I'm not really reading anymore, I'm just looking at symbols. So I close the book and turn off the light. Right now I'm reading a book about the history of light bulbs. This might sound boring, but it's actually quite interesting. The book talks about how people used to use candles and oil lamps, and how the light was different, warmer, softer, more alive because it flickered. Then Edison and his colleagues developed the incandescent bulb, and suddenly light was stable, constant. You could flip a switch and there it was, reliable. This changed everything, the book says. The way people worked, the way they spent their evenings, the way cities looked from space. I'd never thought about light bulbs as revolutionary. But they were. They are. I'm about halfway through the book. I read it slowly, a few pages each night, taking my time. The light bulbs aren't going anywhere. There's a poet named Mary Oliver who wrote about paying attention. That was her whole thing, basically. Paying very close attention to the world, to grasshoppers and geese and light moving across a field. She wrote a line that people quote a lot. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? It's a good line. Maybe a little dramatic for everyday use. You wouldn't say it to someone at the grocery store. Paper or plastic. Well, what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? But the question is real. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Are we paying attention? I think writing and reading are ways of paying attention. You have to slow down. You have to notice things. The exact right word, the rhythm of a sentence, the feeling behind the meaning. It's the opposite of scrolling, of skimming, of consuming information like fast food. It's more like growing vegetables, waiting for them, tending them, eating them slowly. I don't know if that metaphor works, but you understand what I mean probably. When I was in college, I took a creative writing class. This was a mistake, sort of. Not because the class was bad, it was fine, but because I learned that sharing your writing with other people is uncomfortable. We would write stories and then bring them to class, and people would talk about them. Not in a mean way. Everyone was polite, but they would point out things that didn't work, plot holes, characters that felt flat, descriptions that went on too long. And they were usually right, but it still felt bad to hear. I remember writing a story about a man who built miniature houses as a hobby. Very detailed miniature houses with tiny furniture and tiny books on tiny shelves. In the story, he would get lost in the work and forget to eat or sleep or call his family. When we discussed it in class, someone said, "I don't understand why he builds the houses. What's his motivation?" And I didn't have a good answer. In my mind, he built them because he liked building them. That was enough. But I could see how that might not be enough for a story. Stories need reasons, causes and effects. I never revised that story. It's in a folder somewhere with all my other college work. Unfinished, unresolved. But I still think about that man sometimes, building his tiny houses. Peaceful, focused. Not worrying about motivation. There are writers who write about big things, war and love and death, and the meaning of existence. These are important topics. Someone should write about them. Then there are writers who write about small things, the smell of rain on pavement, the sound a refrigerator makes, the way light looks coming through a window at 4 p.m. in November. I prefer the second kind, although maybe that's obvious by now. There's a Japanese concept called mono no aware. It means something like the gentle sadness of things, the awareness that everything is temporary, the beauty that comes from impermanence. Cherry blossoms are the classic example. They bloom for a very short time, a week, maybe two, and because of that, they're more beautiful, more meaningful. If cherry blossoms bloomed year-round, we probably wouldn't care about them very much. I think small moments work the same way. A particular afternoon, a specific quality of light, the way someone said goodbye once, in a way they've never said it before or since. These things matter because they don't last, because they're here and then they're not. And writing them down is a way of saying, this was real, this happened, it mattered, even if it only mattered to one person, even if that person is you. I have a typewriter. I bought it at an estate sale for $20. It's a Remington from the 1970s, greenish blue, heavy. I almost never use it. Maybe once a year I'll take it out and type something. A letter, usually. To no one in particular. Just to hear the sound of the keys striking the paper, that satisfying mechanical clack. There's no delete key on a typewriter, no backspace. If you make a mistake, you have to cross it out or start over or just live with it. Your errors are permanent, visible. This is stressful, but also freeing in a way. You can't endlessly revise. You can't delete a paragraph and rewrite it 12 different ways. You just have to commit, make choices, move forward. I typed a page once where I misspelled beginning. I saw it as soon as I typed it. 1 N instead of 2. But I kept going. The page wasn't for anyone else. It didn't need to be perfect. When I finished, I looked at that misspelled word and thought, there it is. Evidence of imperfection. Proof that a human did this. It made me happy, that mistake. It was honest. Books smell different depending on how old they are. New books smell like possibility, fresh paper, ink, clean. Old books smell like time, a mustier smell. Sometimes a little sweet. Sometimes like basement or attic, but in a good way, a nostalgic way. I knew someone once who said they couldn't read old books because of the smell. It bothered them. They only read new books or e-books. I understood, but also felt a little sad about this. Missing out on all those old books, all that accumulated time. Although I guess the words are the same whether the book is new or old. The smell doesn't change the story, it's just texture, atmosphere. Still, I like the smell of old books. I like opening one and being reminded that other people have read this same copy, that their hands touched these pages, that they sat somewhere, maybe decades ago, and read these same words. It's a connection, subtle, but real. I tried to keep a journal once, a daily journal where I would write about what happened each day, what I did, what I thought about. I lasted about 2 weeks. The problem was that most days, not much happened. I would write things like, went to work, ate a sandwich, watched TV, went to bed. This felt depressing, like my life was too small to write about. But then I read the diary of a farmer from the 1800s. Someone had published it as a historical document, and it was just as boring as my journal. Planted corn, repaired fence, rain, day after day of simple, repetitive tasks. But reading it, I found it beautiful. This record of a life, this evidence that someone existed and worked and paid attention to the weather. It mattered. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because it was a life, fully lived. So maybe my boring journal wasn't boring. Maybe it was just honest. I still don't keep a daily journal, but I think about it differently now. The value of ordinary days. The importance of small records. There's a kind of writing called automatic writing. The idea is you write without thinking. You just let your hand move and write whatever comes out. Stream of consciousness. No editing, no judgment. I tried this once. I set a timer for 10 minutes and just wrote whatever came to mind. It was mostly nonsense. Fragments, random thoughts. The carpet is blue. Blue like what? Like sadness? No, that's stupid. Blue like a blue carpet. Why am I writing about the carpet? But there were a few interesting moments. Thoughts I didn't know I had. Connections my brain made without my conscious mind directing it. Near the end, I wrote, everything I forget is gone forever, and that's okay because I can't remember it anyway, so how do I know it mattered? I read that afterward and thought, that's kind of interesting, maybe kind of true. So automatic writing worked, in a way. It bypassed the part of my brain that was trying to sound smart or make sense. It got to something more raw, although most of it was still about the carpet. When you read a book, you're hearing someone else's voice in your head, their way of thinking, their rhythm and vocabulary and concerns. This is intimate, strange when you think about it. You're letting a stranger's thoughts directly into your mind. You're giving them time and attention, trusting them to be worth it. Sometimes they aren't. Sometimes you read 50 pages and think, I don't like this person's voice. I don't want to spend any more time with them. And you put the book down. This is okay. You don't have to finish every book. Life is short. There are too many books and not enough time. But sometimes you find a voice that feels like home. Like this person understands something essential. Like they're saying things you've thought but never articulated. And those books you keep forever. Even if you never read them again. Because they were there when you needed them. Because they made you feel less alone. I read that Kurt Vonnegut used to tell his students to write with compassion, to be kind to their characters, even the bad ones, to remember that everyone is trying their best with what they have. This seems like good advice for writing, but also for living. When you write about people, real or imagined, you have to inhabit them, understand why they do what they do, even if what they do is wrong or hurtful or stupid. This is hard. It's easier to make people simple, good or bad, smart or dumb. But real people aren't simple. They're complicated and contradictory, and often confused about what they want. Writing helps with this. It forces you to slow down and think about motivation, about context, about the fact that everyone is the hero of their own story, even when they're the villain of someone else's. I don't know if this makes me a better person, but it might make me a more understanding person, which is something. There's a moment in writing and in reading where everything clicks, where the words stop being just words and become something else. A window, a world, a feeling. It doesn't happen all the time. Maybe it's rare, but when it does, it's magic. I felt it once reading a description of rain. Just rain. Someone described how it sounded on a tin roof, and how that sound was lonely but also comforting. And how when you're inside listening to rain, you're both protected and isolated. And I was suddenly there, in that room with that rain, feeling exactly what the writer wanted me to feel. That's the thing writing can do that nothing else can quite do. It can transfer a very specific experience from one mind to another, across time, across distance, across the fact that we're all fundamentally alone in our own skulls. For a moment, reading or writing, we're not alone. We're connected. Understanding each other. It's brief, but it's real. I should probably start wrapping up. It's getting late, or early, depending on how you think about it. I hope you're comfortable. I hope talking about books and writing has been peaceful, or at least not annoying. The thing about books is they're always there, waiting, patient. You can pick them up or put them down. They don't mind. And the thing about writing is it's just thinking, but slower, more careful, more permanent. You don't have to be a writer with a capital W to write. You don't need to publish anything or show anyone. You can just write for yourself. Small things, true things, things you notice or wonder about or want to remember. It's a way of being here, of paying attention, of saying, this moment happened, this thought existed. I was alive and noticed something. That's enough. Before you fall asleep, maybe think about a book that mattered to you. Doesn't have to be a famous book. Doesn't have to be a good book by any objective standard. Just a book that was there when you needed it. Picture it. The cover. The weight of it. Where you were when you read it. Thank that book quietly for being what it was. For finding you or you finding it. Then let it go. Let all the words and thoughts settle. Let them become part of your sleeping mind, working on things you don't need to direct. Tomorrow the books will still be there. The stories. The words waiting in their patient rows. Tomorrow you can write something if you want. Or not. Either way is fine. For now, just rest. The books understand. They've been waiting a long time. They know how to wait a little longer. Good night, the bookmark goes here. Between this moment and the next. Holding your place. Making sure you can find your way back when you're ready. Sleep well.